Great. Welcome, everyone. I can see many people flooding into the Zoom room. My name's Dr. Emma Lawrance. I'm the mental health lead at the Institute of Global Health Innovation at Imperial College London. And it's my real pleasure today to be joined by Dr. Bob Doppelt, who can speak to us about a whole range of things, the work that he's been leading for decades now in how to build strong communities in many different aspects of that, and the mental health and psychosocial spiritual impacts of the climate crisis, and how we can, in his words, just then get ahead of what's happening to really build resilience in communities so that we can, as a collective, meet the crisis in the best ways possible to put us in the best position to adapting to what the threats that many communities around the world are already facing, and how we can start to transform our societies in the ways that we need. So yeah, it's a real pleasure to hear from an expert on this by experience across a wealth of disciplines and communities that he's worked with. So Bob founded and coordinates the International Transformational Resilience Coalition, a network of mental health, social service, disaster management, climate and faith organizations and professionals. And he's trained in both counseling psychology and environmental science, and has combined the two fields throughout his career. So again, I think really ahead of the curve as we start to try and bring together the mental health and psychology professions and the environmental climate science professions. He's naturally worn those two hats throughout his career. He's also a graduate of the International Program on the Management of Sustainability in the Netherlands, and a mindfulness-based stress reduction instructor, which many of us all need a good wallop of at times, I think. So in addition, he's been a fellow at the Rockefeller Foundation. So I will pass to Bob, who will also go further in talking about many of the experiences that have brought him to this work and share with us his insights, and really looking forward to hearing from you. And thank you for joining us. I know many people are joining from different parts of the world, and I'm sure you'll very much enjoy the next hour with Bob. Just to note, if you have any questions as we go, please put them in. There's a Q&A button, so you can see that at the bottom of your screen. If you will keep an eye on that, and there will be time for questions to be answered towards the end of the session, and I'll be able to look at that and share that with Bob. So please do share your thoughts, share your questions in the Q&A function. And now, yeah, I'll pass to you, Bob, with pleasure.
Well, thank you, Emma, and hello, everyone, from wherever you are and whatever time zone you're in. My name is Bob Doppelt, and I coordinate the International Transformational Resilience Coalition. I'm going to share my slides now. And let's see, get it. Hard time finding the, there we go. Great. Well, first of all, I want to say that.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. I want to really thank Emma for allowing me to give this presentation, and to all of you who are involved with Climate Cares. I don't know of another university program that has a specific program on climate change and mental health. There's a number of organizations that have sort of programs on it, but not a university, and I think it's really, really wonderful. I want to just give you a background of today's presentation. I want to first talk about the ITRC Transformational Resilience Coalition and our activities since 2013. So I used to coordinate the University of Oregon. We were one of the first organizations in the US that was funded by the Rockefeller and Ford and other foundations to run around the country to develop their first climate action plans. This is going back almost 20 years, way ahead of most what others were doing. And we focused mostly on the external physical factors involved with climate change, both mitigation, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and climate adaptation, helping to prepare physical systems, transportation, housing infrastructure, et cetera, for the impacts of climate change. And And then along came Superstorm Sandy, if you might recall, back in 2012, that really hit the east coast of the US extremely hard. And we saw mental health problems skyrocket in New Jersey, Connecticut, New York. But it also skirted along the coast of Florida, where my organization was working. We actually helped organize the Southeast Florida Climate Resiliency Compact down there. And so we saw those impacts. And I saw the mental health impacts because I'm trained as a mental health clinician for many years. And most of the other folks in the climate field didn't see it, or weren't concerned about those impacts because they're biologists, they're geologists, they're trained in other sorts of things. But because of my grounding in climate science, I knew the climate emergency was going to get way, way worse. So then I retired from the university and formed the ITRC back in 2013. So we're 10 years old, 9.5 years old, and been growing ever since. So we started off running workshops and training programs. We had conferences right in Washington, D.C. for the Obama administration and many others. And then a couple of years ago, about 3 years ago, some of our members started to come to us and said, we've got to come up with a different approach for how we deal with the mental health and psychosocial impacts of the climate emergency because we can't keep up with what's already happening. So that kicked off what became a 2.5-year intensive research project. We thought it would be 2 or 3 months, but it went on for 2.5 years. And we talked with programs all over the world asking the question, is there any methods, any policies, approaches that can prevent and heal widespread, ongoing traumas, mental health and psychosocial issues, short word for that being traumas that I'll use. And it turns out there are. And that's what I want to talk to you today. So, and that involves what in the Western world we call a public health approach to mental health. There's been lots written about a public health approach to mental health for many, many years, big books written about it, but not much action taken. But a number of communities are engaging in that, although sometimes they don't call it a public health approach. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. We started running a community of practice on this about 3 years ago with many people from the EU involved, people from Africa, all over North America, a few in Asia. And we have one going right now. We'll start another one in the fall. So we're trying to train people, and I'm going to share a little bit about that. And also the realization that we needed a public health approach to mental health, which is mostly applied in communities, and I'll explain that in a second, led us to work with members of Congress to get the federal Community Mental Wellness and Resilience Act introduced in Congress. Actually, it was introduced last Congress, last fall. It was just reintroduced again to this Congress at a much stronger level about last week. And I'll talk about that. And also, when we were doing this research and finding out that this is the approach that's really needed, people come asking us, is there a manual on how to organize these community initiatives? That led me to realize we need that, so I developed the book, Preventing and Healing Climate Traumas, A Guide to Building Resilience and Hope in Communities, which is from Routledge Publishing, and I'll talk about that. I want to start off by saying we've really got to get our heads around that we're in the midst of a rapidly accelerating climate ecosystem biodiversity catastrophe. And I'm using that word for a very specific reason. And that is, it comes out of disaster sociology, where they define emergencies and disasters and catastrophes as sort of three separate, although interconnected issues. Catastrophes have multiple interacting forms that are very substantial and widespread, that build on themselves and are cumulative, and are far more complicated, far more severe, and far more prolonged than emergencies and disasters. Disasters is sort of what we've set ourselves up to deal with. Emergencies, disasters, they're single events that end and give people time to recover. That's not what's happening as the climate change worsens. And the climate emergency is not just about atmospheric issues. It's also related to the degradation of ecosystems and loss of biodiversity. It's all interconnected. So we really have a catastrophe. And most important is that you don't respond or manage a catastrophe in the same way that you respond to emergencies and disasters, because they are much more complicated, much more severe, widespread, and prolonged. And that's really what we're facing with the climate emergency. And the climate catastrophe is consequently a mental health and psychosocial emergency as well. And we've got to think and respond proactively, not reactively, which is what our mental health systems mostly do. And we have to do that through a population level approach, because it's going to affect everybody. It's not merely reacting to individuals, the symptoms of pathology, or reacting to help people through the next disasters. So I'm going to share a little bit that I'm sure most of you, because you're involved with climate cares, know, so bear with me, but then I'll get into the public health approach component. But disasters capture most of our attention, that, the heat wave, the big storm, etc. And although they do, the most pervasive and relentlessly harmful impacts of the climate catastrophe are cascading disruptions to the social, ecological, and economic systems people rely on, food, other basic needs. And these create persistent toxic stresses that eventually will affect everyone, whether it's rising food prices, food insecurities, etc. Everyone's going to be affected, and many people are already affected, especially if you look around the world in less developed nations. And those cascading disruptions to the ecological, social, and economic systems we all rely on for basic needs are intermixed with and often generated by these more frequent, extreme, and prolonged emergencies and disasters that by themselves can traumatize millions of people. 20 to 40% of the people who are directly impacted by a disaster or an emergency can be traumatized, as well as 10 to 20% of those who watch it from afar, etc. And as the catastrophes accelerate, everyone is going to be impacted. We have to get that clear in our head. We're seeing that throughout North America, throughout many other continents. In the near term, it's true that in different ways, times, and magnitudes, certain populations are at greatest risk. BIPOC residents, indigenous people, low-income residents, migrants, single women. You can see the list, and I'm sure you know this list. And they will always be at greater risk, but actually some of them are more resilient than people who have had a lot of stuff their whole life because they've had to learn how to deal with these issues. That's not mean it's a good thing, but we just have to realize that this is a population level problem that are, in fact, aggravating existing inequalities and injustices and adding new ones that will affect these groups. So we have to think that about. Yes.
I'm very sorry to interrupt what is such an important moment in the talk. I just wanted to note that we really, really want to hear everything that you're saying. And there's some microphone static. I think it might be coming from where it's positioned. If you're able to move it somehow, I'm not sure. It's just like I think a rustling of the clothes that people are noting that it's hard to hear.
Let me see.
We can't hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
At all?
I think that's, if you say something again, I think that's clearer. Okay,
I'll try it again and see if I'll hold it out here.
There's some buzzing now.
All right.
So, sorry for this. There's some buzzing.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there's some buzzing happening though. Oh,
I can't hear you, Emma. You talking?
Yes. Can you, if you keep speaking, I think it's clearer now.
Did something happen? Emma, can you hear me?
I can hear you. That's clearer now. Please.
But I can't hear you. Something just.
Oh, it's all good.
So can you hear me? Can I go on? Okay. All right. So let me just take this off and hold this. So unaddressed, and again, these are things I think you all know, so bear with me. We're going to see a global pandemic of not just individual mental health problems, but community and societal level distresses and traumas. psychological, emotional, and spiritual distress is. It's climate anxiety. It's just really the ability to a difficulty in dealing with the stresses of life and those that we see coming our way. And most of you on the line all know what individual trauma means. It's a blow to the psyche that really breaks through one's defenses. Such brutal force that we can't react to it effectively, and especially in catastrophes. As so often happens, people withdraw into themselves. They feel numb, afraid, vulnerable, and very alone. But just as importantly, what we're seeing around the world already is community trauma. And it's an event or series of events that create a blow to the basic tissue of social life that damages the bonds we have with other people and impairs our prevailing sense of community. And it's a realization that the community, our social supports, don't exist any longer. Therefore, an important part of our self has disappeared. And community trauma can affect people in a specific geographic area. It did in not far from where I live in Oregon. The entire town of Blue River burned down 2 years ago in extensive heat waves from drought and other problems. The entire community was traumatized. But it can also affect people with shared identities. That community, religious or spiritual, refugee or internet-based groups. And we also have societal trauma, which goes beyond a specific geographic area or a group with a shared identity to affect entire cultures or nations or all of humanity. And the COVID-19 pandemic is a classic societal trauma. And unless we get out front of this, the climate catastrophe is going to be the greatest societal trauma modern humanity has ever experienced. And just as importantly, again, and bear with me, most of you know this, there's no physical health without mental health. This was Brock Chisholm's comment many years ago. That is to say, there's lots of comorbidity. It's very common. So adverse mental health conditions often aggravate existing or directly produce new physical health problems. And physical health problems can lead to mental health issues. But professionals in both the mental health, psychosocial, and physical health field often don't recognize this or don't know what to do about it. I've run a big conference just for physicians in Oregon for a couple of years in a row, and that's exactly what we found. And the doctors and physicians are distressed because of that. Just as importantly, we have to understand that pervasive traumas feed on themselves and create an epidemic of trauma. And that's because, again, as many of you know, unaddressed trauma becomes buried in the nervous system and can cause people to deny what's happening, dissociate, disconnect from it, blame others, attack others, self-sabotage, or reenact the various behaviors and practices that caused the trauma in the first place as they try to work it out in their mind. And as seen time and again throughout history, the combination of these travel, families, groups, communities, and entire societies. And we're seeing this in many parts of the world, not all directly related to the climate emergency, obviously, yet, but it is happening. And just as important, we have to realize that widespread traumas can also block climate solutions. We found that in our work all the time. In the US, there's a lot of opposition amongst especially people who consider themselves Republican Party members, political party members. But what we found is that actually, as you well know, that when people are traumatized, they go into a self-protective survival mode. They're trying to just get by. And therefore, the energy that normally goes to the executive center of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, is sort of cut off. And it just goes into fight, flight, freeze reactions. All of our body's energy goes there to protect ourselves. And that makes it very difficult for traumatized or severely stressed people to grasp complex issues like the climate crisis or worry at all about their environmental impact. And they will often oppose anything that they see as threatening, which can include a policy or a practice that shifts from clean energy away from fossil fuels, et cetera. So this actually is an environmental problem, is a psychological, emotional, spiritual problem. It affects families, communities, and all society, but it circles back and has direct effects on our ability to address the environmental and climate issues. And Emma, this is one thing I remember from the study I read that you wrote up, or you were one of the leads on, that climate traumas and most other traumas today result from interacting individual, family, social, economic, physical, built, and ecological factors. It's not just genetic issues. The health field, for most places, focuses on the individual and to some extent the interpersonal. This is the social ecological model. You can find lots of research on it. But it's the conditions of our community, the structural conditions of society, and the environmental conditions people live in that also affect people. And we've got to address all of these issues if we're going to address the climate emergency. Mental health services and social services will remain very important, but they can't, certainly in the US, they can't even come close to addressing today's scale and scope of mental health problems. There's simply not enough clinicians, and there never will be. And 50% or so of the people who have a serious mental health problem won't seek out help anyway because of fears of stigmatization and other reasons. And so they have no chance of preventing or healing the scale or scope of the traumas speeding our way. They'll remain important, but they can't do it. So we've got to get out of our silos, respond holistically. That's the way we describe it. We have to really change the way we see the world, think, and respond. But if we take this path and looking at the communities we worked in, the climate crisis catastrophe can actually activate some very deep-seated transformational change. So what we found in our research, is extensive research, is that we must build population-level capacity for what we call transformational resilience. That's why we call ourselves the International Transformational Resilience Coalition. And that means that when suffering is caused by previously unseen external forces that have no endpoint, no resolution, or simple cure, the priority must be to help people develop the capacity to buffer themselves from and push back against those stressors. And as they do that, find new sources, constructive new sources of meaning, purpose, hope, and courage, because it's going to require a lot of courage to address the challenges of the climate emergency. So by transformational resilience, a simple way to think about it is what we call help everyone develop the capacity for presencing, self-regulation skills, age and culturally appropriate skills, simple age and cultural appropriate skills to calm the mind, body, emotions, and behaviors in the midst of adversities, and purposing skills or adversity-based growth skills, which are skills that help you find new meaning, new sources of meaning, purpose, hope, and courage in life. Both presencing and purposing are really important. Our coalition focused on adversity-based growth. We thought that was too wonky for the general public, so that's why we came up with transformational resilience. That's what we mean by that. And we have found that the combination really helps rebuild faith in the future. And the capacity for transformational resilience is shaped by all of these different factors involved with the social ecological model. And local residents and local organizations and volunteers have always, throughout history, been key to prevention and healing and recovery. And this will become even more crystal clear as the climate crisis worsens. So with that as background, our research determined that addressing those population
Bob, we've lost your sound.
approach to mental wellness resilience takes a population level approach, not one that merely focuses on individuals with symptoms of pathology or high-risk groups, though they are included in the population level approach by using what's called proportionate universalism and life course approaches, and we can get into that in more detail. So our mantra's got to be, leave no one behind. A public health approach to mental wellness and resilience prioritizes preventing problems before they occur, not merely reacting to them after they emerge, and it integrates group and community-minded healing methods into the prevention strategy. I'll explain that in a second. So we must always remember that prevention is the cure. And a public health approach to mental wellness resilience focuses on strengthening protective factors, social supports, the personal and collective resilience skills, norms, habits, resources, etc., that build and sustain healthy thinking, behaviors, and systems not just trying to fix deficits or treat symptoms of pathology. So we really have to focus on strengthening assets and resources. And I think the research is very clear that we know how to build mental wellness and resilience. It can be enhanced. And the research also shows that the most effective way to do this using a public health approach is to establish the social infrastructure in communities that is often called a resilience coordinating network, sometimes a resilience coordinating steering committee, variations of that. We just call it a resilience coordinating network. But it engages a broad and diverse array of local grassroots and neighborhood leaders, civic leaders, nonprofit, public, and private sector leaders in jointly planning and implementing multi-systemic strategies that strengthen capacity, mental wellness, and transformational resilience among all residents, all adults, all adolescents, and young children. So here's a sample ideal resilience coordinating network. This is taken from the New Hanover County Resiliency Task Force in New Hanover County, North Carolina in the US. But in the middle there, you see there's a circle, and around that circle is the steering committee or the board of directors. They call them different things. And starting at the top, some have neighborhood leaders, private sector, civic leaders, youth leaders, public sector leaders, mental health and human service leaders, nonprofit, faith leaders, etc. They come together to jointly plan different strategies to build mental wellness and resilience, and I'll talk about those in a second. But outside of that are these resilience innovation teams that are working with different populations that keep their strategies coordinated with the steering committee or the board. So there's a neighborhood up in the right-hand corner, a group working with neighborhoods, a group working with the private sector, one with youth, one with the educational systems, one with the public sector, and you can sort of see around there. And they stay coordinated. They share what they're doing, they get feedback, and they go, oh, have you thought about this? Or they identify a population that's not being served. You know, your education program's working with public schools, but you know, about 10% or 20% of the students in our community go to private schools. Have you thought about reaching out to them? And is there any way to do that? So, and they also can share and develop better fundraising strategies. And we see this kind of network in different forms. It's called a ring team or a hub and spoke approach all over. And finally, our research identified 5 foundational areas required to build population-level capacity for transformational resilience, specifically for the climate catastrophe. The first and far and away the most important is going to be to build social connections across cultural, economic, and geographic boundaries in the community. Social isolation and loneliness is toxic today in many Western countries. The COVID pandemic aggravated that, but it really is not the cause. It's the internet, the kind of jobs we have, and many other things. And building these social connections helps overcome those problems, those issues. So that's really important from a mental health perspective. But just as importantly, friends, families, and neighbors that you know are far more important than first responders for the first 3 to 5 days, and often much longer, of disasters and catastrophes, and they're definitely key for long-term recovery. And social connections are vital to build social efficacy and the courage required to implement climate solutions. And I don't have time to go into it, but there's bonding, bridging, and linking social support networks. That's one way to think about it, many ways to think about it. But the second of the 5 foundational areas, and I'm describing these linearly. It's not necessarily linearly, and the programs that we looked at and work with don't start with social support networks per se. They start wherever it makes sense in their community, but make sure they go back and deal with these others. But this involves actively engaging residents in creating low emission, climate resilient, physical built, economic, and ecological conditions. That is, you're making a just transition so that with all the impacts that occur by addressing the physical built, that is housing, transportation, et cetera, jobs and ecological conditions, if any impacts are shared equally and any benefits are shared equally. That's what a just transition means. And when people see progress in this, it increases their courage. We've seen this time and again. There's the Neighborhood Resilient Project in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Low-income populations, mostly BIPOC members, people of color, who are just depressed because they don't have no jobs and many other things. But when they see courage, the research that they've done just shows that they really start to increase their sense of wellness and well-being, and they start to help others. And in doing so, we also reduce the community community's contribution to the climate crisis and increases its physical resilience to the impacts. The third of the foundational areas we found is to build universal literacy about mental wellness and resilience. That is, you say, help everyone become trauma and resilience informed. So it means helping everyone understand how trauma and toxic stress can affect their mind, body, emotions, and behaviors. And how trauma and toxic stress affects groups. So when you see groups acting out, you know, oh, they're traumatized and they're having the same kind of reaction. And then learning those simple presencing or self-regulation and purposing adversity-based growth skills. So as you build social connections, you can help people become more literate about mental wellness and resilience. And as you engage people in building a just transition, you can foster universal literacy about mental wellness and it really addresses many of the issues. It avoids stigmatization, so people begin to realize, oh, what I'm experiencing is not different than anybody else, nothing wrong with me, and it builds the skills that people have that help them prevent and heal mental health struggles personally within themselves. But because they then understand this is a natural reaction, they begin to help others also. The fourth foundational area is to engage residents in specific kinds of activities and practices that the research shows is unequivocal that enhances the capacity for mental wellness and resilience, transformational resilience, especially in the midst of ongoing adversities. Finding ways to help people laugh often at themselves, at the conditions of the world, etc. A neighborhood resilience project in Victoria, Canada, was working on building these kind of resilience skills, and then they realized that people needed to laugh a lot. So they created a show where they got people together to do a play that was funny, that allowed the neighborhood to laugh. Then they found it was so powerful, they actually made it into a URL, a video, and you can get it online on how to create playful laughter in your community, working with the Neighborhood Resiliency Project. But practicing forgiveness, help people learn, be grateful about what they already have, caring for the body, and finding simple joys in life, we find the research is really unequivocal. And when people engage in these activities, it releases the trauma that's buried in the nervous system. And it helps build the collective purpose and courage needed to address complex problems like the climate emergency. And as with every one of these the four of the five foundational areas I've described already, there's communities all over the world that we looked at are engaged in one or more of these. So we didn't make this up. This is already happening. And the fifth foundational area required to build population capacity for transformational resilience for the climate catastrophe is to establish ongoing, age and culturally appropriate, peer-led, group and community-minded healing opportunities to help people heal their trauma. Even if people engage in all of these other four areas, there's still going to be many people that are traumatized and whole groups and communities that are traumatized. And so they're going to need help to release that trauma and heal themselves. And one of the most powerful is healing circles and other group healing methods. Integrative community therapy was developed down in Brazil by Dr. Alberto Barreto. That really is a healing circle. It was developed for the communities that were really in the worst economic shape. And it's now been embedded in the entire Brazilian healthcare system, and it's moving to other countries also. It's embedded in some other countries. That's just an example, but there's somatic healing, expressive arts therapies, dance, mindfulness-based healing, spiritual healing will be very important. Religious and spiritual components of this will be to deal with the climate emergency will be extremely important. Nature-based healing, and also memorial events and rituals that to remember and recall a disaster or when people were lost, et cetera, to keep us that clear in our mind. And you'll see down in the right-hand corner, clinical therapies will be part of that. But what we find in these communities that are working on it, it's a small part. It's focused really on people who still cannot function or are really risk at harming themselves or harming others. And so again, these group and community-minded healing methods avoid stigmatization, because you're with a group and everybody's sharing what they're going through, and you realize, oh, I'm not alone, etc. And it builds those social connections. People learn, become more literate about mental wellness and resilience. Oh, I understand what's happening within me now. And it also develops a common purpose and courage needed in catastrophes, because that's, people come together and say, oh, we can stay together, we can help ourselves remain healthy and heal, and in doing that, we can address these issues. Here's just a few examples of programs in the US that are organize these resilience coordinating coalitions. The North Carolina Smart Start program, or North Carolina Partnership for Children, that runs the Smart Start program, has now 40 underway across the state. This is a conservative state. And they're addressing 4 ACEs, they call them: adverse childhood experiences, adverse community experiences, adverse climate experiences, and adverse cultural experiences, or actually they call it atrocious cultural experiences, meaning racism. And they got some very effective programs like the New Hanover County Resiliency Task Force. But the Community Resilience Initiative in Walla Walla, Washington started about 15 years ago. It's been very effective. The San Francisco Neighborhood Empowerment Program, that's a large urban area, has done some great work. They start off with the social support network focused by actually close down roads in urban San Francisco and hold potlucks. They call it Neighborhood Fest, and encourage everyone in these large apartment buildings to come out into the street, bring food. They set up tables and they get to meet each other, and they continue to do that. And you can find that information on their website. And then they form a steering committee from the people that are there. The steering committee develops a resiliency plan for the local neighborhood. Peace for Tarpon in Tarpon Springs, Florida is another one of the first actually in the US, doing great work. Robin Sangers, who runs that, and many of the other people who run these programs are on our national steering committee. The Putnam County Community Resiliency Coalition in New York was focused on youth, building resilience within youth, and it was very successful, but it ran out of money when COVID hit. There's over 200 associated with the Mobilizing Action for Resilient Community program called MARC. They were mostly focused on adverse childhood experiences. It's run by the Health Federation of Philadelphia, so you can find more there. As I said earlier, only a few of these existing initiatives frame their work as a public health approach, but they're using that. Each is unique, and none addresses all of the 5 foundational areas I spoke of. And only a few are explicitly focused on the climate catastrophe, but they're building the kind of resilient skills we need for that. And if they expand their focus to address the climate catastrophe, and thousands of new community initiatives or neighborhood initiatives in large communities, you want to do this at the neighborhood level, if we launch those, we can build this universal capacity for transformational resilience. And just a reminder, building the social infrastructure in communities now, those resilience coordinating networks, or whatever you want to call them, is really key to success. Although they're well-intentioned and helpful, and I was trained in this field, mental health services offered only after people experience traumas and toxic stresses, programs focused only on specific populations, actions by specific organizations on their own. We can't build the population level mental wellness and transformational resilience that's urgently needed for the climate catastrophe that's going to go on and worsen for decades. So how can you help empower the movement? We call it educate, organize, and then take action. So at the personal level, as Emma said, we all need these resiliency skills. Learn and practice those 5 core foundational areas. Look at your social support networks. Understand how you're engaging and helping the community with its social, economic, and built environment, etc. And teach those skills to your family and friends, and learn presencing and purposing skills, and teach those to your family and friends. As you well know, when you try to teach something to others, you learn it best. Getting it out of your head and getting it out of your mouth really helps us learn. At work, educate your colleagues, organize some support in your organizations, and then take action by organizing and supporting a resilience coordinating network within your organization, and/or getting involved with the local, getting your organization involved with the local resilience coordinating network. And in your community, educate and get colleagues organized into a planning group. Most of these resilience coordinating networks start with 3 to 5 people in the community or neighborhood who come together and say, yeah, we need to do this. And then develop a vision of what they want. They share it with others and it grows from there. You can do the same thing. Invite others to join and then help organize and operate a local resilience coordinating network. One of the things we found when we interviewed and researched all these programs is that funding for startup for the first 3 to 5 years is really critical and often what causes them to fail. So we worked with members of Congress, the US Congress, to introduce what is now the bipartisan, which is unusual in our Congress now, Community Mental Wellness and Resilience of 2023. Again, it was introduced last year to get the ball rolling. Now it's been introduced. It's got good representation of Democrats and Republicans. It's also been introduced in the US Senate. And it's got 140, actually it's more than that now, but almost 150 national organizational endorsers from the American Psychological Association, American Psychiatric Association, National Associations of Social Workers, American Public Health Association, and many state and local organizations. So, but we need similar policies in every nation and at the provincial and community levels. We've got to start supporting and funding these local community networks. And you can take a key role in that by talking with your officials and seeing if you can do it. And as I said, we run a community practice on this, on organizing and operating a resilience coordinating network. And we're going to begin a new one in the fall. And if you're interested, just email us at tr@trig-cla.org. We're going to run one just for public officials, public agency officials, and another one for the general public. And they've been very successful. And we're also going to soon announce a certification program to help local groups form and operate resilience coordinating networks in different nations. And what I mean by that is we have a method, a three-phase method that we're about to share out publicly to help communities get organized. We provide certain kinds of technical assistance in the first phase. Once they go through that and meet all the criteria we set out, they move to the second phase. We provide them increased technical assistance and help them move to the final stage, which is certification, where they can actually claim they're certified by the ITRC to do this work. And actually, a number of our steering committee members are going to join that certification program, so they can use that to go out and fundraise, et cetera. And so look for that. We might be able to engage. And also then I wrote this book on it, Preventing and Healing Climate Trauma, as a guide to building resilience and hope in communities. You can get a 20% discount if you purchase the book by using the discount code below. And you can see we've got some really wonderful testimonials about it. These are all from people who helped write the book through interviews and research, et cetera. So happy to share more about that. So for more information, please contact us at, again, trig-cli.org. And our website is http://itrcoalition.org. And with that, I'm going to stop and we'll just take questions.
Thank you so much, Bob. Really,
Emma,
really
I can't hear you
appreciate.
for some reason. Are you on mute?
I'm not muted, but I'm not sure why. If you unplug your
Can't hear you.
headphones, maybe I can write it in the chat.
Something's happened.
I think everyone else can hear me, I believe. Maybe Jess, you can put a thumbs up if you can hear me. Or challenges of technology. Great. Okay.
Can somebody else talk and maybe share the questions, because I can't mute and I cannot hear Emma.
Jess, do you want to try?
Hi, Bob. Can you hear my sound?
No, it doesn't seem like it. Maybe we can ask Bob to disconnect his headphones. Try that. Or I can also post. I can maybe also see in the question. We've got a question I can read out for everyone else's benefit.
I still can't. I disconnected my headphone and I still can't hear you, Emma. Something is
okay. Something strange.
Something's gone awry with this wonderful technology we have.
I've put the question in the chat for directly to Bob now. So I'm hoping he can now see that.
Well, if you
And I'll
can
share
hear
my
me,
screen.
if you can hear me, why don't I just try to answer some questions I see in the chat. A question from Britt. What approaches do you put stock in for how mental health professionals be thinking about stepping out of the clinic and supporting the community-minded healing interventions? Should we look at global mental health approaches or task shifting or other approaches? I think it's up to each of you. There's many important ways that clinicians that I was trained in, for example, can and need to help these programs. For example, because the healing programs, the community and group-minded healing, really often need to be run by peers, because otherwise people won't participate. They get nervous about stigmatization. It's a clinic, I'm going to get therapy, etc. You can train those people. And many clinicians do that kind of work. You train peers in how to, about mental wellness and resilience skills. You train them about how trauma and toxic stress affect their mind, bodies, behaviors. You train them with different kinds of skills to help people just talk and feel comfortable and safe. And then you help them learn how to teach that skills to others. So you become the trainers of the peer-led approach. But also, you should participate on the steering committees. Just don't lead it or lead it alone. So people, again, don't think it's a treatment program. But you should be actively involved, because the clinicians have so much to offer, but also you have contacts often, many of us do, to funders and other experts outside, and you can help make those connections. So we're going to be very, very important to have the mental health professionals involved. It's just that they're taking a different role. But most importantly, you're going to have to keep doing the mental health work that you're already doing, the services. When people start building those social support networks, people start often finding friends and neighbors who now they realize are really in serious trouble, and will start referring more people to clinicians. So actually, the demand is going to go up, not down. So keep that in mind. But there's many important ways. Let's see. I see a question from Emma. What approaches do you put into stock for mental health professionals? Oh, same kind of question. All right. Maybe they're in twice. All right. Yeah, I only see a few. Somebody else read any other questions that you see? One new message just showed up.
Yeah, I've put some.
How much of the mental
Bob.
health incidents after an event are the result of social welfare crisis and can easily be overcome with funding for economic support given through disaster preparedness? That's a good question. Different countries have different approaches to disaster preparedness and response. Some are more effective than others. What we have seen is that most of the disaster response approaches are not very effective, at least in Western world, in the US specifically. They're very fragmented, they're confusing, they're late in the game often. So I think that, and also even when there's a commitment to provide funding for social welfare, it's often very difficult to get, doesn't come in a timely way, and often not as nearly as much as people need in these incidences. So I think you have to really think about that. We've sort of decided that the emergency disaster management, disaster mental health services, they'll all remain important, but they're not going to be the key here. And they're not going to help overcome the constant toxic stresses and traumas that people are experiencing. But the more you can improve them, the better we are for doing that. Do you think engaging in collective action to mitigate the climate crisis can help build community resilience and prevent climate trauma? Absolutely, depending on what you mean by collective action. I think getting people involved together, building those social support networks and engaging them in reducing local emissions in their community by increasing the health of their local ecosystems to sequester carbon, by building climate resilient and low emission economic systems, et cetera, is vital. And then when people do that, they often then come together to advocate for policies and programs at higher levels, either at the community levels, the provincial, or the national level. I think that's really important. Just keep in mind that collective action could also go awry because it can pit one group against another, as we've seen throughout history. So beware of that and keep an eye on that. And also collective action can be difficult because often there's conflicts that arise among groups. So one of the first things most resilience coordinating networks do is they actually run events during their meetings to help people learn, the members learn how to do conflict resolution and how to solve complex problems. They're often done through playful activities, not serious things. But start that early on so people understand when you get a conflict, how do you work that out? How do you talk honestly with each other? So good communication and doing that. And then collective action can be very, very important. Individuals alone are not going to solve the climate emergency, and let alone change their own community. But when individuals, especially strong leaders, get together with others, then you have a lot of power. Question posed anonymously. How much of the mental health incidences after an event are the results of, that's the second question. So it's coming in twice for some reason. Oh, I see, we're copying them. All right. From Pauline. Do you think engaging in collective action to mitigate the climate crisis can help build community resilience? As I just said, yes, we have seen in many communities when community members get involved to reduce emissions, it's really very, very powerful. In most communities, that's left up to government or the private sector, or occasionally a nonprofit to work on emission reduction, shifting to clean energy in some way, shifting to electric vehicles, whatever it might be. And that often leaves people out and it affects their own community, but they have no say in it. Often, the government puts out a plan and asks for comments on it, and that's the extent of it. What we have seen is communities that actually engage residents in the work themselves, in developing the plan. They go out and they work on it, and they engage people in their businesses to reduce emissions, et cetera. It's a much more powerful approach. So I think that's really where it's at. Again, we sort of fallen into this thing in Western society because into these specialized niches, these areas that we fall into, and somehow mitigation is over here with the climate mitigation specialist and mental health is over here with us. We have to bring this back together, and that's how it happened throughout most of human history. That's really good, really important to keep in mind. Another way to say it, and I say it throughout the book, is we have to return a responsibility for mental wellness and resilience to communities where it is historically always located, and most importantly, has the greatest chance of success given what's coming our way, what's already here, and what is speeding our way. It's not going to be individual clinicians that help address these issues. It's going to be communities, family, friends, neighbors, engage in these 5 areas and variations of those 5 areas that I described. So one of the questions I see is from Emma is how to measure these the initiatives, the progress. It's a very good question. Almost all of the community initiatives, those I put on the screen there and others, most of them start off by measuring outputs, meaning they said they were going to try to reach out and connect 40% of the community or the neighborhood with each other within the first 2 years, or 35% or whatever. And then they go and they measure that. Did we do that? Or was it 15%? Or did we get more? Then after that, they then begin to measure outcomes, which means, okay, now that people have met each other, how many people now believe they have someone they can rely on for emotional support or practical assistance in the midst of adversity that they didn't have before? Measure that. Oh, so of the 45% of the community we were able to reach out to, 50% now told us they have someone else in their life they can reach out to for emotional support, et cetera. So that's how they mostly get going. And then often once they get up and running after 3 to 5 years, they usually, many of them, when they can, work with the university to do an evaluation, a much more thorough one. I write about that a lot in the book, how these community initiatives do that. Because as well as you all will know, if you're university related, you're always looking for good projects for your students to work in and an intern in. So and we have that's our staff mostly at the ITRC as grad students. So it's a good way to do that. Okay. I see somebody said we'd love to help you to get to work together to develop community-based practices in Kenya. If you can send me an email with your name, send it to tr@trig-cla.org. Let's talk about that by email, how we do that. And let's see. So here's a question again from Emma. I see that the prevention needs social and behavioral changes in many cases to create public immunity. It's a good way to describe it. And is it the responsibility of everyone? Who's the best to lead? Most of these initiatives come together and are led by people who weren't normally thought of as community leaders. They're not the mayor. They're not the elected officials, and they're certainly often not the loudest people in the community. And that's what people often think, oh, those who speak out the most and the loudest, those are the ones that are leaders. They're not necessarily, that's not necessarily the case, because they are often more interested in themselves or in their organization, not the whole community. So what normally happens is one or two people get together, three people, they have coffee, they get together after work, and they start talking about what would our vision be for building resilience in our community that's different than happening now, and what would things look like in 3 to 5 years that's different than what we can project now. And they create a vision of what they'd like to do. Then they go out and they say, okay, who else can we share this with? And each identifies 3 or 4 people. They go share that. They bring some people in, and it grows in that level. Sometimes they're well known in the community, sometimes not. Sometimes they start in the organization. A woman named Terry Barilla, on her own, started the Walla Walla, Washington Community Resilience Initiative. She was a reporter and worked in other agencies. She knew people. She just started interviewing people. She said a lot was going on in the community, as it is in many of our communities, but wasn't coordinated. It wasn't really a population level approach. She started meeting with people. They got a vision together, and it ended up with this incredibly successful long-term program that is a good example. So it's, and then over time, as you get more and more people involved, watch for leaders, people who others normally respond to, or who have the capacity to reach out and communicate with everybody. And they usually just sort of emerge naturally. They don't often think of themselves as leader, but then you can just ask them, can you get more involved? We'd love you to sort of take on a role. And that's just a way to do that. And sometimes it is a nonprofit executive or others sometimes an elected official, but not often. We're about out of time. You want me to answer the rest of these questions, or?
I think we'll stop for now. I know Bob can't hear me, but just to say a huge thank you. I will have to share the thanks back with him later. So I think we're liaising with him over the chat, but thank you so much all for joining. I know it's been a really, I think inspiring is the right word, message. Clearly, sometimes we have a lot of the problems that we're very aware of, but not necessarily the solutions. And I think Bob has really outlined this amazing work that he's been spearheading together with so many others over so many years to really understand how we can come together and respond in a way that empowers everyone to be able to act within their own communities and prepare for the changes that we already see coming at us in ways that will strengthen the mental health and well-being of our communities, as well as protecting them better from climate threats and transforming in ways that enable a safer climate future. So yes, Bob's saying and sharing with us. Good luck to all of you. I'm sure he would love to hear from you. I'm sure he would love to hear about the books. Also, just want to mention that a lot of what Bob is talking about in terms of connecting across disciplines, communities, learning from each other. The Climate Cares is involved in a project called Connecting Climate Minds, and we can share the link with that in the chat as well if you're interested in joining, if you haven't already heard about it. It's a year-long Wellcome funded project to build regional communities of practice in climate change and mental health, and be able to set research and action agendas for an aligned vision for the climate and mental health community moving forward. And we would love you all to join us in this. It's very connected to much of what Bob was discussing. So yeah, if we can all thank Bob. Again, I know many of you thanked him. If anyone wants to post in the chat and thank Bob, I'm sure he would appreciate that, or in the Q&A, we can share that back with him. But thank you so much all for coming, and have a wonderful rest of your days and nights. This recording will also be shared if you'd like to pass it on to others and spread the word. So many thanks again, Bob, and to you all for joining. And with that, I'll close
Thank you all.
close the webinar.
Thank everybody. Let's stay in touch. Take care.